And I'm joined by the Vincent Kompany. To my Scott Parker, it's Justin Peach.
Good day to you, Ryan.
I say Vincent Kompany because I'm still getting over, Justin, that remarkable video which has come out, which is a clip of the latest series of the Burnley documentary where he's screaming at Joey Goodmanson.
Yeah, it's an uncomfortable watch, isn't it?
It is, really
it's sort
is.
of like, I sat at my phone, I was like almost wincing a little bit, like, fucking hell.
Yeah.
Bloody hell, wait, this is a bit much, Vinny. Like, it's not life or death. Like, there's more to life than having the right body language, which is a quote from
and
Vincent
Joey
Kompany.
Goodmanson's body language.
Yeah. But the thing is, the funny thing about that quote is Joey Goodmanson asked him, like, he blatantly said, like, I'm not moaning. And then Vincent Kompany goes, well, it's your body language then. And completely backtrack on his dealings with old Joey.
Yeah, and he's had a bit of criticism for that, but I imagine he's not the only manager who does that. It's only because the cameras are there that we see it. I imagine it's the kind of thing that happens at every training ground pretty much every day. So maybe we shouldn't lay into him too much, but let's forget about Vinny Kumps. Let's talk about Scotty Parks, Justin, because his Burnley side were absolutely rampant at Kenilworth Road, weren't they?
They were, and I think the key thing you can take away from it, from a Burnley perspective, it was a very good away performance because they didn't have the lion's share of possession. They were just really, really clinical. They were really clinical in their moments, and they were super incisive. Whether that was fast counterattacks going forward or just getting the ball moving in a forward direction quickly. It wasn't like a Scott Parker performance we're used to seeing in his previous spells. This was a really, really good away performance. Very well structured, very organised, but very clinical in possession and going forward. It was a really, really good performance from Burnley.
Yeah, I was very, very impressed. I don't think anyone can deny that it was very, very impressive. I mean, we all know, first of all, that Kenilworth Road is a very difficult place to go, particularly with the setup of the teams this season. But Burnley, the game plan was absolutely spot on. I mean, Dara O'Shea at the back was phenomenal. Esteve alongside him was also very, very good. But the header for O'Shea's goal was sublime.
Yeah.
I mean, Luton were just pumping cross after set piece after set piece into the box, and those two at the back were just dealing with them every single time. They had absolutely no luck because of those two. So, yeah, a really, really impressive performance. And then when it came to the goals, 2 through balls, actually 3 through balls, really, wasn't it? Ignoring the set piece for the O'Shea goal. 3 very, very quick breakaways. I thought the pass for the first goal by Lucas Pires was absolutely class as well. So yeah, it was just everything that you'd hope for from a Burnley perspective, just soaking up everything that Luton have and then just hitting them when it really mattered.
But this is what I mean. That's the type of away performance you need, especially when you're going away to tough grounds like Kenilworth Road, like you might go to Ellen Road or Stadium of Light when the atmosphere is going to be heated, it's going to be on you. You've got to keep your nerve, and I don't think there'll be harder places to go because the atmosphere can really, really generate at Kenilworth Road. The crowd's on top of you as well, and you stand up. His first game of the season, it's under the lights on a Monday live on Sky. It was a hotbed really, but Burnley managed it. They managed the occasion really, really well because it's one of those occasions that can get away from you, but they didn't allow it. They were very composed, and that told in the goals that they scored, how they took them, and how they played, because I don't think they were ever really in any trouble here. There were moments from Luton, but Burnley looked very, very comfortable, and I think that's down to the game plan from Scott Parker, which deserves a lot of credit. Yeah,
it definitely does. You are absolutely right as well. Luton didn't offer a whole lot. I mean, we gave Derby a load of stick for just pumping in cross after cross. And while I think Luton, they had a bit more of a game plan about them than Derby did, it was just, trying to press down the wings and seeing if they could make anything different happen. But when O'Shea and Esteve at the back were just dealing with them so well, it really meant that Luton were pretty scuppered with their final ball. I thought Alfie Doherty didn't have a great game, considering the number of chances he had to whip the ball in from a set piece, and his deliveries weren't up to scratch at all. It meant that Luton didn't really have much apart from the one moment, which ended up being the goal from Tariq Chong. That was the only real lapse in concentration that Burnley had at the back, wasn't it? Otherwise, Luton were pretty luckless going forwards, weren't they?
Yeah, you say luckless, but they just seemed a bit off it. They seemed lethargic. It wasn't quite like the Luton performance that we're sort of used to seeing, whether that be in the Premier League or the Championship. Didn't look like they were bountiful of energy. And as you say, their game plan really getting it in wide areas. You see, when we criticised Derby for it, we have to criticise Luton for it as well. I thought Carlton Morris and Elijah Adebayo cut very lone figures at times. Tae Chong did try and keep making things happen, but still wasn't quite clicking. So maybe it's just a case of Luton just starting slower than maybe many would anticipate. Maybe they need a few more bodies in. There are a lot of question marks, I guess. But what's very evident here is this was a really poor performance from the Hatters, and one we're not really used to seeing, because they're not a team that have ever really conceded a lot of goals. But they defended really, really poorly, dreadfully at times, actually.
Yeah, they did defend poorly. I thought at times, to be fair to Luton, in the first half, particularly towards the end of the first half, they were looking quite dangerous. It's just the final ball really let them down. But you are right, at the back, they really, really struggled. It is worth saying this was the youngest starting 11 Rob Edwards has ever chosen. And they had two lads in, Zach Nelson and Joseph Johnson, who were making their first ever league starts ever at any professional standard. And they lost their men for each of the first two goals. And it really showed that inexperience, really. I think Joseph Johnson in particular had didn't have a great game at all. Don't want to pick on him, but this is what we're here for. Luton looked really
picking on players.
Well, when we've got to say it as it is, really, haven't we? I mean,
exactly.
Mengi at the back was meant to be the experienced head here, and how old's he? He's early 20s, isn't he? And he's got two teenagers alongside him, and it really did show, unfortunately, for Luton, didn't it? And I mean, this goes back to what we've been saying with Luton over the past couple of weeks, really. Even though we have been giving them quite a big billing, Justin, they definitely need to sign players, don't they? And this was a perfect example of why they need to do that. Yeah,
you look at the squad depth. I mean, Reece Burke, I didn't give him a mention last week in the preview episodes, and he's a good defender, but he has just a habit of picking up injuries. Amari Bell, similarly.
He was on the bench, Bell, wasn't he? Which I thought was a bit strange, considering how inexperienced the back line was.
Yeah, you are right, but it might be a fitness issue or anything like that. He might just not be ready for the game. There's a lot of elements that we don't really see as pundits or supporters. But you are right. I do think they need to bring in maybe an experienced centre half just to add to the depth that they've got. They do play with three centre halves very regularly, so having a little bit more depth in that department will help, especially when you rely on younger heads. In big games like this, it shows. It really does show. Not only in organisation, but leadership and a cool head in those moments, and also just bollocking a teammate if they lose a man. Was there that element there from Luton? I don't think there was. Not that it has a massive impact on the game, but these little things do help. But you are right, as we were saying. Cut a long story short, Luton do need to recruit 3-4 heads, I think.
Yeah, and this just highlighted that, didn't it? This just highlighted the fact Luton desperately need to bring in at least 2 or 3 players before the window closes at the back. I would say midfield as well. They could probably do with another body as well. But we spent a lot of time here talking about Luton. Justin, we need to heap more praise on the job that Burnley did here, because it was such an impressive performance. And of course, a lot of people have had a bit of scepticism about Scott Parker, us included. Could he prove a lot of people wrong this season based off this showing? We will use the old words that we've used quite a lot over the past few days: marathon, sprint, etc. But based off this, could he do that?
I think he could. Like, as I say, if you look at this game in isolation, it wasn't a typical Scott Parker performance where his team passes it from side to side. It's really drab. He tries to dominate possession and really exhaust opposition teams doing it that way. They were the team without the ball. As I said, Luton had the high percentage of possession. They also made more passes, way more passes, over 100 more passes than Burnley did. So Burnley were quite happy to sit in the shape and manage the the game in that way. And as I say, I think if you're away from home and you've got that in your locker, it's a very, very nice facet to have. And also, this Burnley team has a lot of pace, a lot of drive, a lot of excitement going forward, a lot of technical quality, probably more so than his previous teams that he's managed, which I think is a big point to highlight. So he's got to tap into that, and he did. And results like this shows that he did, because if you look at the fourth goal, I know Lyle Foster picks it up from the edge of his own area and dribbles 60 yards, but it's a great finish by Vitinho. Tapping into the quality that you've got on the break like that is going to get you more goals, and that's the interesting thing here about Scott Parker.
Yeah, it's when it's games like this where Scott Parker ball, when it works, looks really impressive, because it's all about soaking up the possession and just being really, really good with it when you actually do have the ball. It's just going to be more fascinating when they're playing teams, when they're going away to the Kassam, for example. Do you know what I mean? Where he's got to be more dominant with the ball, I suppose, and how they make that count when it matters. So that's going to be the interesting thing with Scott Parker. I'm very wary here that anything that we say which is slightly negative may come across as quite spiteful, Justin, if you see what I mean. When really, when he's done such a good job as this, you just got to take your hat off to him and say this was a really, really good performance. But whether it'll work out for them in long term, who knows? But here, the quality that Burnley have really did shine through when it really mattered, didn't it?
Yeah, it did. And like you said, I am going to praise Scott Parker. I'm a huge Scott Parker skeptic, massive skeptic. But it is performances like this where they are presented a challenge without the ball. The opposition, Luton in this case, have dominated the ball. Burnley have sat back and soaked it all up and were very exciting on the break, but also they took the zip out of the game when they need to. There was that game management element there where they will sit with the ball, pass it around a little bit and go from there. There was countless times where it was picked up by Trafford, between Esteve and O'Shea. They will take the zip out of the game doing that. But they're devastating going forward. And I think Scott Parker will be daft not to tap into that. You are right. He's going to come up against different challenges where teams will sit back themselves against Burnley. But I think if you've got the flexibility to play one way, like he did here, and maybe another way, that's where we might see Scott Parker excel here. But we won't know until we see those challenges he faces. But looking at this game, you can only heap praise on him because it was a brilliant performance.
Yeah, 100%. It certainly helps when you've got players like Wilson Odobert, 19 years old. I was really, really impressed with him. Took the second goal really nicely. He looks like he could be a very, very tasty player to watch this season. Final point on Scott Parker. I'm loving his little curly locks on the back, Justin. They are superb. He's giving me proper just come back from a gap year kind of vibes. Do you see what I mean?
He has been on his gap year. He's been in Belgium. He's taken some time off. The issue that I actually do have with Scott Parker from this game is he was wearing a shacket on the touchline. It was a very hot day. It was 30 degrees in some places. He wasn't sweating. That leaves me with a lot of questions that I need answers to. Is he just able to adapt to the temperature? Does he have ice packs in his shacket? Is it all for style, or is he a cold-blooded lizard? I don't know. I'm not a conspiracy theorist, but this gives me more questions than I need, and I need answers to them very, very quickly.
Well, I would certainly like those answers, particularly to the last question that you provided there, because that's something we certainly need to know. Also, great to see Wout Weghorst come off the bench. When that popped up, I was like, "Is that Wout Weghorst?"
I think it's one of those transfers that, again, it did catch me by surprise to see him come on, because I assumed he was loaned out to somebody 3 or 4 weeks ago. It's negligent on the Championship expertise from my point of view, but given that's happened in the last 3 transfer windows, I just assumed he was out the door. But fair enough, the shithouse. He is a masterful shithouse, because everything he does for the Netherlands is absolutely spectacular. He pissed Lionel Messi off, and if he gets time in the Championship, I can't wait to see more of it.
Yeah. Well, from what I've read, obviously Weghorst wants to be playing at the highest level he possibly can do, and that's
Should he,
completely
though?
that's understandable. Well, it's understandable that he wants to do that, but Scott Parker has kind of offered an olive branch to say, well, we would love to welcome you back in, so if you're willing to put up a fight for us this season, then come do it for us. So, I mean, I'd love to see Wout Weghorst in the Championship, because it would just be such great entertainment watching old Wouty bully defenders all season. Whether it actually happens or not, it's going to be fascinating to see. I mean, it's going to be fascinating to see who's still at Burnley come the end of the transfer window, because Weghorst obviously is one who's been linked with a move away. Dar O'Shea's been strongly linked with a move to Brentford. I'd be quite surprised at this stage whether he's going to stay or not. Lau Foster's been linked with a move away. James Trafford has been strongly linked with a move away as well. So there's quite a bit up in the air with Burnley at the moment. Of course, we have spoken at length about how ridiculously big their squad is. So they've definitely got the numbers to cover that, but it's certainly going to be fascinating as things go on to see how things pan out for them and what Scott Parker has to work with, really, Justin.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, look, his squad's big enough, even if he does lose players. There are players there that can step in, I believe. As I say, if you lose some of the key players that played in this game tonight, there are likes of the Anis Saruri, Emmanuel Benson waiting in the wings.
Well, I mean, Justin, think about it this way. If Dar O'Shea goes, they've got Jordan Bayer, who was one of the best defenders in the Championship.
Exactly.
2 seasons ago. If James Trafford goes, they've got Václav Kladky, who was one of the best goalkeepers in the Championship last season. So they've definitely got a lot to play with here, haven't they? So even if players go, I don't think we should be too worried about Burnley on a squad perspective. It's more other factors, you know.
Yeah, they're in a nice position. And I think the key thing that we need to point out is if you're a Premier League club that gets relegated to the Championship, you are in some cases going to be under pressure to sell. And in addition to that, you become a selling club because you have to make bank. So you can't really rule anyone leaving at this point. I think it's unlikely that a lot of those players will go, because I think Burnley will retain the strongest players and probably sell some of the fringe ones. But you just can't rule it out.
Yeah, definitely. But top of the overall, we've just got to say what a very impressive performance by Burnley. Luton, very disappointing. Got to sign players. In fact, Justin, one final question, I suppose. Considering we've been very strong on Luton in our predictions, is this putting a bit of doubt in your mind, or are you very much trusting the process?
Well, I want to trust the process, but how often do we see title winners get panned 4-1 on the opening day of the season? Not very often.
Yeah, I'm just trying to think back. Leicester won on the first game of the season last season, didn't they? Burnley won. Burnley looked very impressive when they won the league a couple of seasons ago, didn't they, on that opening day? I can't think any further back than that, but you are right. Yeah. So the thing is, we've got uncertainty with all these teams at the top, haven't we? And Luton, the big uncertainty with them is that at the moment they're looking a bit open at the back. They've got to sign players, so that's something that we're just putting blind faith in with Luton, that they will get it right, because they have a track record of doing that.
Completely agree with that. But the time to get transfers in was a couple of weeks ago. They've put themselves under a little bit of pressure. But as you say, as a football club, they're very well run. Recruitment department's probably the best in the UK. You'd back them to find solutions to the current problems they've got.
Yeah. We do. We're putting the blind faith in them. But definitely a concerning showing for Luton fans, particularly at home. So we'll wait and see. But Luton next week, they have got a pretty tricky game coming up against Portsmouth, who obviously have just come off the back of a fantastic showing against Leeds. It's away at Portsmouth as well. So Rob Edwards will certainly be thinking there's a lot of work to do for us based off this showing. Burnley, on the other hand, they've got Cardiff at home. And one would fancy Burnley to get all 3 points from that game, but we shall wait and see. Justin, this has been us reacting to Luton v Burnley from Monday night, our first Monday night showing of the Championship season. I was expecting this to be our first reaction episode of the season as well, but obviously events earlier in the day have made that not to be the case. But a big thank you for tuning in to this edition of the Second Tier Reaction Show. And we'll be back again on Thursday, where we'll be doing the usual midweek show, reacting to all the news in the Championship from the past few days, including every bit of transfer business that has happened across the second tier. So we look forward to seeing you then for that. But this has been the Second Tier Podcast. I've been Ryan Dilks.
I've been Justin Peach.
And a big thank you for listening.